So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to our main speaker for today, Anthony Hollander. Anthony is the Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research and Impact at the University of Liverpool, and he's the chair of the N8 Strategic Executive Group, which is one of our governance groups. It's the group of Pro-Vice Chancellors for Research. And he's also the chair of the Net Zero North Project Board. And Anthony's going to give the main presentation in a couple of minutes. But first, I'd like to introduce Chris Day, the Vice-Chancellor from Newcastle University and the chair of the N8 Limited Board, to say a few words of welcome and perhaps to give a short context of how we came to N8 Net Zero North. Chris, over to you.
Hi, thanks for that, Nick. So welcome everyone to this webinar. As you know, Net Zero North really came out of a long series of discussions about how the N8 universities could best position themselves with respect to the forthcoming spending review. We thought that this was an outstanding opportunity, really, given the emphasis in every single government document and speech that you hear about what has been now described commonly as levelling up, which essentially seems to mean putting more government funding outside the so-called Golden Triangle. And the second piece of policy that's coming out of most government departments is a commitment to carbon neutral economy. And of course, that's been made even more important by the COVID crisis and emerging from the COVID crisis in a carbon neutral way and in a way that doesn't further widen the disparities across the nation. So once it became clear that that was the political environment that we were in, we did a piece of work looking across the N8 universities at what were the strengths that could play into that agenda. And after quite a lot of work by Anthony, the SEG group, talking to a lot of stakeholders, as you'll hear in a minute, we've come up with this unified submission for the CSR, with a closing date at the moment of the 24th of September. For that CSR. We think the actual announcement will be made sometime probably in November. In terms of where we are with it, it's been sent to special advisors in the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. It's been sent through Jim O'Neill, who is the Vice Chair of the Northern Powerhouse Partnership, as many of you will know, and has been extremely helpful as an advocate for this bid. And that through him, it's got to, again, senior civil servants in the Treasury, and we're waiting for feedback from them. One of the purposes, I guess the two main purposes of this call, firstly is really just to inform you about what we're planning, where we're up to, and what we've said so far has simply gone to special advisors largely. So there's plenty of time. We've got 4 or 5 weeks before we have to submit anything. So very much welcome feedback on anything that's in the presentation you'll hear in a moment from Anthony. But also asking through your various connections for your advocacy, really, in those connections as to how we can land this in the right way with the government. We believe fairly firmly that the Treasury is the key player, Treasury in number 10, having support from other government departments like the Ministry for Communities and Local Government, which we have contacted the Minister Simon Clarke there. BEIS, as I've mentioned, I think is very helpful, but all of our advice, including from Jim himself and indeed the mayors of the combined authorities of Manchester and others, have been extremely, again, supportive, but made it very clear to us if we don't get this on the desk of key Treasury officials, then we are wasting our time. So really, once you've heard the presentation from Anthony, very much welcome comments on the content, but also your thoughts and views on how we might get this on the right desk at the right time to land this bid. So I think that's all I want to say at the moment in introduction. As Anthony, who you've had introduced from Nick, will now take you through a PowerPoint presentation, which we've given to several people in government and connected to government already, for both your input and your comments as to the advocacy. So over to Anthony. Thanks, Anthony.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Chris, for that introduction. Apologies for the pause just there, the usual technical stuff. So Net Zero North is all about the green economy as the driver for post-COVID growth and levelling up in the North. And it started as an N8 conversation, and I think we can say it's N8-led in partnership with the Northern Powerhouse. But actually, I hope we can all agree this is a coalition across the North for all of us who would like to see the green economy thrive, create jobs in the North, and for the reduction of carbon, more upon which is a coalition, and I hope you all will feel members of that coalition and full participants. At the moment, we're requesting £300 million as an investment from government through the Comprehensive Spending Review. And what we are indicating to government we will deliver with that investment is shown in the bullet points here. First of all, 16,000 student years of net zero training, that is training in net zero related subjects, provided by further education colleges across the North. An increase in the Northern Powerhouse GVA by an estimated 1.5 billion. And in terms of carbon reductions, by 2030, we aim to contribute 20% of the reduction in carbon emissions that are required in the north of England to put the region and also the country on track to achieve net zero by 2050. Now, of course, that's something of a thumb in the air estimate. The calculation of that is based on the graph on the right here, where the black line at the top is historical data for carbon emissions in the North. The red line is an extrapolation if we were to continue reductions at the same pace without doing anything else over the next few decades, although that's probably optimistic. The blue line is an estimate using the Tyndall Centre carbon budget calculation from Manchester University. That's the estimate there. And then the orange line is our estimate of how North will accelerate changes by 2030 and then extrapolating forward from there. So again, a bit thumb in the air, but we have confidence that that's not a bad place to start in estimating the impact of the programs I'm about to describe. It's worth just explaining why this is a Northern project. What is it about the North that makes it a good home for the work I'm about to describe? And the first is the challenges we face in the North. I'm sure I don't need to persuade this audience of the economic challenges we've faced for a long time. We punch below our weight economically in terms of productivity, investment, R&D spend, skills, and entrepreneurship activity. And of course, all of that is being exacerbated by COVID-19 across the North, and particularly in left behind places that are so often talked about. That's the economic disparities. But equally, we have environmental challenges. The economy of the North, we estimate, is 16% more carbon intensive than England as a whole. And the North produces 32% of UK emissions, but we have 26% of the population, so we over-emit for the size of our population. And in some local authorities, more than a quarter of the jobs are in high emission businesses, and that may contribute to the bullet points above. So those are the challenges, but there are also real opportunities to be had in the North. We believe we're the best place to lead the UK's transition to a net zero economy, and in particular, a just transition. Already 35% of jobs in the low carbon goods and services sector are in the North, and 50% of renewable energy in England is produced in the North, and we have real strengths in green technologies. So levelling up and the ambition to level up, which is much expressed by government, and the challenges of COVID-19 have created an opportunity now to build up, to build back, but to build back through green businesses, the green economy, to do that much more quickly than we might have envisaged some months ago, and in doing so, potentially to attract inward investment and drive export opportunities. And we really believe the combination of the challenges in the North and the opportunities that it pre-existed COVID and that have been exacerbated by COVID really make this the right time for investing in the green economy in the north of England. The Prime Minister said in a recent speech, in the next 100 years, the most successful societies will be the most innovative societies. And we agree with that. And the diagram on the right, this pyramid is an indicator of the space that will be occupied by Net Zero North in terms of activity, because it's not about traditional university research. This is all about the innovation pathway, knowledge exchange, skills, and engagement with industry and other stakeholders to drive adoption of new technologies. That space we want to operate in through Net Zero North. Okay, let's delve down now into a bit more detail. And Chris mentioned to you that at the start of this process, we mapped out within the net zero space where our strengths lay just within the 8 universities of the N8. And I should say that we have other universities who are involved in Net Zero North already, Teesside and Manchester Metropolitan University, and we're open to any of the universities in the north of England joining with us. But our starting point was an asset map across the N8, and this was in the early part of the year pre-COVID, but of course the assets haven't changed. And those are outlined here in these 4 blocks. So we've grouped our assets, as it were, into these 4 net zero related themes. The first is land-based solutions. How can we use our land and assess the way we use our land to address carbon reductions in the green economy? Related to that is the circular economy, and how, in other words, how can we avoid emitting carbon by circularizing the economy in different sectors? The third is, the final one is net zero connectivity. Net zero connectivity is a combination of reducing carbon emitting mobility by a transition to low carbon transport, but also removing the need for mobility through the increased use of digital technologies. And it's really interesting that we were talking about that back in January or February, with no idea that within a few weeks we would all be Zooming and teaming and using the kind of technologies we're using at this moment to interface in a way that we otherwise never would have done. Perhaps had COVID not happened, this meeting would have been taking place in one of our cities in the north, and we would all have transported ourselves to those cities and contributed carbon in the process. And there's a lot more gain to be had from those. So having made those analyses and compared those assets of the N8 with independent reviews of strengths in the north, such as the independent economic review of the Northern Powerhouse and SIAs and so on, and through extensive engagement with industry and other stakeholders, we came up with 2 innovation projects which will form the heart of what we want to achieve in net zero. One has this title, Grow Smarter, grow in relation to land and land-based solutions, as well as the circular economy. And the other is the sustainable hydrogen economy, linking to local energy supply, as well as transport and net zero connectivity. So those are 2 innovation projects, and I'll go into more detail in a moment. But again, to emphasize, this is not about blue skies university research. This is very much about innovation support, technology development at those intersections of research and innovation where rapid gains can be made, and industry-focused research to really drive forward adoption of solutions within the Grow Smarter and Sustainable hydrogen economy spaces. But layered on top of that and alongside it is what I'm particularly passionate about personally, which is skills and productivity, and how we can drive an upskilling of the northern workforce, capitalizing on the terrible crisis we're going through at the moment, to upskill, particularly in the green economy in the net zero space, both in relation to growth, smarter and sustainable hydrogen economy, but also in relation to the whole area of Net Zero North described by those 4 themes on the left there. So that's our third project, the 2 innovation projects and the skills project. And again, I'll say more about those in a moment. And it's through this broad approach that we intend to deliver the ambitious outcomes and deliverables and targets that I outlined earlier, and which we've shown for you again here. Okay, so let's just go into a little bit more detail. And I'll start with the sustainable hydrogen economy. So it is our ambition to drive an uptake of hydrogen through multiple sectors of the economy at a pace and scale that without Net Zero North and without this particular moment in history and all the changes we're going through. For those of you who are familiar with hydrogen as a fuel, and it's been around as a fuel for a long time, you'll be aware that hydrogen is pretty much entirely derived at the moment from fossil fuels. It's not a sustainable fuel source right now. However, in deriving hydrogen from fossil fuels, it is possible to offset the carbon emissions from its production through a variety of means, but carbon trapping, carbon sinks, and so on. And that's called blue hydrogen. And we think that there's a potential for rapid market growth through the uptake of blue hydrogen, which essentially already exists. And if we can remove some of the barriers to adoption and uptake, then we can already quickly see a transition to not a sustainable hydrogen, but a lower carbon hydrogen through carbon offsetting. But that's not an end in itself. That's, if you like, a stepping stone. And it's our theory that uptake of blue hydrogen will be accelerated and be more enticing to sectors of the economy if it's clear that there's a pathway to green hydrogen, what we call green hydrogen, sustainable hydrogen, coming in behind the blue hydrogen. So a really important part of what we want to do is to understand how to derive hydrogen at a low price and at a large scale from clean energy sources such as nuclear power and renewable sources such as wind or tidal, and that's green hydrogen. And actually the North is a really good place to be thinking of doing this. In Cumbria, of course, we have Sellafield and nuclear providers, SMRs coming on stream, and so linking that nuclear energy source to the derivation of hydrogen in a low carbon, low cost way could really drive the hydrogen economy very effectively. At the same time, we have offshore wind energy production in the northeast, in the northwest, and also onshore wind energy, potentially tidal energy through the Mersey Barrage when it comes on stream in some years' time. And all of these nuclear or renewable sources can be a way of deriving carbon zero or low carbon hydrogen. But that's not the only problem. It's not just about producing green hydrogen in a cost-efficient, scalable way. It's also about storing that hydrogen and distributing it at a scale that can really feed into very large sectors of the economy in the north and hopefully across the whole country. And so we need to look at our land and where on our land we can store hydrogen, as well as technological solutions to storage and then distribution at scale. And there's a kind of reverse effect. Not only can we store hydrogen for feeding that hydrogen directly into sectors of the economy shown here for industrial decarbonisation, clean transport, low carbon heating in commercial buildings and homes and so on. But equally, this is a way of smoothing renewable energy utilization and nuclear energy utilization, because at the moment, for example, we can generate electricity in wind farms, but we can't store it at scale. But in effect, hydrogen can become the mass storage device for renewable sourced electricity, and it can then be turned back into electricity to be used as and when it's needed, rather than having to generate the electricity from those wind farms just when it can be used. So we believe this economy of hydrogen can really solve many problems, and that by working with stakeholders at many of these intersections and tackling many of these problems and barriers, that we can have a huge effect both on carbon emissions, but also on jobs in the north. Okay, that's the green hydrogen economy, the sustainable hydrogen economy. Let's move on to Grow Smarter, this slightly elusive title. But what we're talking about here is how we manage land in all its senses across the north for net zero by reducing emissions, but also by increasing carbon sinks. A carbon sink is any method of taking carbon out of the environment using the land. And probably the carbon sinks will be the greater contributor to reducing carbon in the environment than reducing emissions. But it's a combination of the two that can deliver a more rapid drop in carbon in the environment. This is not just about land use and carbon reductions. It's also about a major sector of economy in the north relating to companies such as Unilever, Procter & Gamble, BASF, PZ Cussons, companies in the household goods industries and the high-value chemicals industry. And all those companies at the moment derive feedstocks, the starting materials for their products and their chemicals, from halfway around the world, and usually materials grown on land in a non-sustainable way. And they are desperate to find sustainable material supplies, feedstocks, starting materials for their products, grown locally so that they're not transported around the world, emitting carbon in the process, and so that they can ensure land is used in a regenerative, sustainable way. And that needs to be linked closely to our ambitions for a low carbon food system. You will know that creating food is a highly carbon emitting process. And one of the things we want to look at is how effectively to use waste products from the carbon production cycle to feed into the materials supply chain I was talking about a minute ago. And there will be many approaches to this, but one we're very interested in is shown here: peri-urban vertical farming. Now, some people know about vertical farming, others don't. It is exactly what it says on the box. It's building vertical structures in places where you wouldn't necessarily expect farming, and farming in a way that doesn't destroy the land from a sustainability perspective, in a very controlled environment. And this was developed particularly for city farming, but we believe that peri-urban space around the cities is actually ideal for a massive expansion of vertical farming. And the point here is not just that there's plenty of land that could be used for this, but also you then create very short supply chains from those vertical farms to the inner cities where much of the food being produced will be consumed. And again, with shorter transport, you're reducing carbon emissions in the transport system. So it's a whole joined up ecosystem. And the last piece of the jigsaw is natural asset management. So this is about the carbon storage economy optimized for climate change resilience, as well as for biodiversity and for well-being. Biodiversity, I think, speaks for itself if we're planting forests and other appropriate plants in the right place to drive carbon uptake out of the environment or into the soil or into the trees. We can also support biodiversity, but we can also create huge tranches of land across the north as part of the visitor economy. which will enhance the well-being of the people of the North, but also drive a new sector of the economy in terms of the use of land and the way money can be made from that visitor economy. So this is not just about removing carbon, it's about creating jobs in areas where really it's been untapped until now. Finally, skills and productivity. And we're really ambitious here, forming what we're calling the Net Zero North Skills Alliance, a combination of what we're calling the N8 Plus universities, that's the N8 plus all the other universities who are ambitious to join us, the Northern networks of further education colleges, and we've been in discussions with a number of them and they're hugely enthusiastic about working with us, research technology organizations, and multiple industry stakeholders and other stakeholders. And through that grouping and experts across those different stakeholders, we want collaboratively to design new training programs at all NVQ levels, but particularly focusing on 3, 4, 5, 6, which is delivered largely through further education, straying into 7, which is master's education, usually in universities, and I'll say something about level 8, which is doctoral training in a moment. And we're calling this the Net Zero North Skills Escalator. And it's not just about thinking through the new provision that speaks to the green economy and the needs of the green economy and its skills. It's an escalator because we want to work together to find ways to move individuals up this escalator so that we can create the Northern green economy workforce. We really want to make it easy for any individual who wishes to upskill to the next level to access that training and to do so within the green economy space. So that's the alliance and the escalator. And there's a third component to skills and productivity, and that is we wish to create 2 skills hubs, very closely linked to our universities, but not based within the universities themselves. Rather, we want to place one hub in Teesside, which is one of the major centres for the hydrogen economy in the north of England. Not the only one, but there are a lot of hydrogen industry assets in Teesside. And the other one in the site for Eden North. Many of you will know that in Morecambe, the Eden project is going to be building Eden North, and they are very keen indeed to work with us. So both Teesside and TWI and RTO in Teesside are very keen to house our hub there, and Eden North is very ambitious in its own net zero activity, in its own educational activity, and they are very keen to work with us there. And it won't escape your notice that both Teesside and Morecambe we might consider as economically deprived areas of the north, and it's not an accident that we're looking at those areas for that reason as well. So what will these skills hubs do? Well, we want to place within those hubs cohorts of doctoral students, approximately 60, to be based in those locations, working with industry and other stakeholders on industrial challenges, but supervised by principal investigators in our universities in the usual way, but co-supervised by experts in industry and Eden North and other stakeholders. And we think in this way, we can really join up our expertise in research with the needs of industry and with the innovation pathway. But it's not all about doctoral training. We want those hubs also to develop extensive outreach programs, working with FE college students and others at all NVQ levels, particularly in left behind towns. And I've shown, for example, here, Blackpool, not far from Morecambe, and Blythe, not far from Teesside, but towns such as those across the north as well, and really drawing people into new experiences and new skills approaches. So in summary, N8 Net Zero North will deliver a skills program that will support levelling up and economic recovery. We really aim to make the UK a scientific superpower in hydrogen technologies, in managing land for net zero carbon by 2050. And we want to develop innovation-led productivity in the Northern Powerhouse through the adoption of those green technologies. Okay, we'll come to questions in a moment. I just want to take a few seconds to acknowledge a number of people, and my apologies for the many of you not named on this slide. I certainly couldn't fit everyone on, but I must acknowledge the writing group shown here, who really did a lot of detailed work on the writing of the document that's gone into government as an outline, the broader project board, the senior executive group of N8, and specialist project groups involving academics in all our universities and some others working with members of SEG in putting together the finer details on these projects, as well as our very many growing number of stakeholders. And I will say these slides will change because this is an evolving project. And if your logo isn't on this final slide right now, I hope you'll join us and send us your logo. We'll add it in and bring you in as a full partner. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Anthony.